My son-in-law threw me out into the freezing Chicago winter with nothing but a trash bag and $42 to my name. Standing on that icy driveway at 70 years old, watching my own daughter scream, "Take your garbage and get out," while the neighbors peeked through their curtains, I thought my life was over. But when I finally opened that bag in a cheap motel room, that night I found $700,000 in cash and a secret note that changed everything. What was written in that note would not only save my life, it would destroy the man who tried to erase me. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from the sound of my vintage leather suitcase hitting the wet pavement echoed like a gunshot in the quiet cul-de-sac. That suitcase had been with me for 40 years. It had traveled to Florida for family vacations back when my husband David was alive. It had sat beside me in the hospital waiting room when he had his first heart attack. And it had been there 2 years ago when I packed my black dress for his funeral. Now it lay face down in a puddle of freezing slush on the driveway of the house I had designed with my own 2 hands. November sleet hit my face like tiny needles. I stood there in my thin cardigan, the blue one David always said brought out my eyes, and tried to understand what was happening. My fingers were already going numb. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees, and the wind cut straight through to my bones. Logan Sullivan stood in the doorway of my home, blocking the warmth that spilled out from inside. My son-in-law, 38 years old, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. His face was twisted into something ugly, something I'd never seen before in the 10 years since he'd married my daughter. He looked at me like I was dirt on his expensive Italian shoes. "You're out of time, Melissa," he said. His voice was cold, flat, empty of anything resembling kindness. "The bank is coming on Monday. This house has been foreclosed on. You need to leave before the sheriff comes to drag you out." Foreclosed. The word hit me harder than the freezing wind. That house, my house in Naperville, was my pride and joy. A 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch that I had designed 30 years ago. Every detail had been my choice. The crown molding in the dining room. The built-in bookshelves in the study where David used to read his engineering journals. The kitchen where I'd taught my daughter Lisa how to make her grandmother's apple pie. I had paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. The house was worth $850,000 in today's market. How could it be foreclosed? I looked past Logan, desperate to see Lisa. My daughter, my only child. The little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. The woman I'd walked down the aisle at her wedding, trying not to cry because David wasn't there to do it himself. She had to fix this. She had to tell Logan he was making a terrible mistake. "Logan, please," I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. "It's 20 degrees out here. It's going to snow tonight. Just let me stay in the garage. I'll leave first thing in the morning. I just need one night to figure things out." He laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and rotten inside him. "There's no garage for you anymore, Melissa. You're a liability. We can't have you hanging around when the appraisers come tomorrow. You're bad for property value." He checked his Rolex, the one I'd helped buy him 3 Christmases ago. "You've got about 3 minutes before I call the police and tell them there's a confused, senile woman trespassing on my property." Senile. The word stung worse than the sleet. "This is my house," I whispered. "I built this house. I designed every room. David and I." "David's dead." Logan cut me off. "And you signed this house over to me 3 years ago. Remember the power of attorney for tax purposes." He made air quotes with his fingers, smirking. My stomach dropped. 3 years ago, right after David died. I'd been drowning in grief, barely able to get out of bed. Logan had come over with Paper's expensive scotch, his voice so kind and concerned. "Just a formality, Melissa. Let me handle the property taxes and maintenance bills. You focus on grieving. I'll carry the burden." I'd signed everything he put in front of me. I never read the fine print. Why would I? He was family. Oh, God. What had I done, Lisa? I called out, my voice breaking. "Lisa, please, come talk to him." For a moment, nothing happened. The house was silent except for the wind and the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then she appeared. My daughter stepped out from the kitchen into the hallway. She was wearing a heavy wool coat, and her face was pale, almost gray. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying. For one blessed second, I felt a wave of relief. She was going to stop this madness. She was going to tell Logan to let me back inside, that we'd figure this out together. "Emily," I said, taking a step toward the porch. The ice on the steps I'd chosen the wood for steps I'd helped David stain 30 years ago made me slip slightly. I caught myself on the railing. Honey, please, talk to him. She didn't look at Logan. She looked straight at me. In her hands, she clutched a large black heavy-duty trash bag. It was full bulging with something inside. There was a rip near the bottom where gray fabric poked through. She walked past Logan like he wasn't even there and stood at the edge of the porch. Her whole body was trembling. Lisa, I said softly. Sweetheart. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't understand. Pain fear, something wild and desperate. Then her expression hardened. Her face became a mask. Take your trash, she screamed. The words were so loud that a dog started barking 2 houses down. Mrs. Rodriguez's Chihuahua. Before I could react, Lisa hauled the bag back and threw it with all her strength. It was heavy, much heavier than it should have been. It hit me square in the chest, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled backward, my heels catching on the wet pavement. I almost fell, but somehow managed to catch the bag, clutching it to my chest just to keep my balance. It smelled old, dusty, like it had been sitting in the attic. Take your garbage and get out, Lisa shrieked. Her voice cracked and broke into something that sounded almost like a sob. Don't you ever come back here. Don't call us. Don't write to us. Just disappear, Melissa. Get out of our lives. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there in the freezing rain holding a trash bag, staring at my daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart, the woman who'd held my hand at David's funeral and promised we'd take care of each other. She was looking at me with what seemed like pure hatred. Logan put his arm around her shoulders. He was smirking, actually smirking at me. You heard her, Melissa. Get lost. The front door slammed shut. The sound was final, absolute. I heard the deadbolt click into place. Then the porch light flickered and went out, leaving me standing in the gray gloom of a winter afternoon. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the sleet to soak through my cardigan. Long enough for my knees, which had been bothering me for years, arthritis, the doctor said, to start throbbing. Long enough for Mrs. Rodriguez to peek through her blinds, see me, and then quickly let them snap shut. Shame burned hotter than the cold. I was 70 years old. I had worked as an interior architect for 45 years, building a reputation for elegant, timeless designs. I had raised a daughter on my own after David's first heart attack left him unable to work. I had paid my bills on time every time. I held doors open for strangers. I volunteered at the library on Thursdays. And now I was standing on the street like trash, literally holding a garbage bag kicked to the curb by my own flesh and blood. I looked down at the bag in my arms. Through the rip in the side, I could see gray fabric. It looked like one of David's old sweaters, the cardigan he used to wear when he worked in his workshop building birdhouses and fixing broken furniture for the neighbors. They'd thrown David's clothes at me. They'd packed up my memories of him and thrown them at me like refuse. Something broke inside me then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack like ice forming on a lake. I bent down, my joints creaking in protest, and picked up the handle of my wet suitcase. It was heavy, but the burden in my heart was heavier. I adjusted the trash bag under my other arm. I should have left it there on their lawn. I should have left the trash where it belonged, but I couldn't. Not when I could see David's sweater poking out. I couldn't leave his things in the mud. I turned and started walking down the driveway. Every step was a struggle. The icy slush soaked through my shoes, immediately numbing my toes. I walked past the mailbox I had installed last summer, choosing the decorative scrollwork myself. Past the oak tree I'd planted when Lisa was 5 years old, back when this street was newly developed and full of young families with futures ahead of them. I remembered lifting Lisa up so she could touch the lowest branch. Someday you'll climb this tree, I'd told her. And maybe your children will too. Now that tree towered over the street, bare branches scratching at the gray sky, and my daughter had just thrown me away. I reached the sidewalk and turned left toward Washington Street. The wind picked up, blowing snow into my eyes. I kept my head down. I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want anyone to recognize Melissa Harper, the woman who designed half the homes in this neighborhood looking like a vagrant. The bus stop was 10 blocks away. My car was gone. Logan had sold it 2 weeks ago, claiming the transmission was shot and it wasn't worth fixing. He'd promised to buy me a new one. That never happened. Just another lie in a long list I was only now beginning to see. My hands were shaking, partly from the cold, partly from shock, partly from the sheer terror of being homeless at 70 years old. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet with numb fingers. I needed to know what I had. I needed to take stock of my life. 2 20s, 2 1s, $42. That was it. That was my entire net worth. 50 years of work, degrees from 2 universities, hundreds of thousands of dollars saved for retirement. And now I had $42 and a bag of old clothes. I checked my phone with trembling fingers. My bank app showed a message in bright red letters. Account frozen. Contact branch. Logan. He had power of attorney. He had access to everything. A tear, hot and angry, rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where people could see. The bus came 20 minutes later. 20 minutes of standing in the freezing wind, hugging a trash bag for warmth, trying not to think about how I'd gotten here. The driver was a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes. "Where to, ma'am?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Where was I going? I had no answer. "Away," I finally whispered. Away from here." He looked at me for a long moment, at my wet shoes, my soaked cardigan, the trash bag. I saw pity flash across his face, and somehow that was worse than Lisa's screaming. $2, he said gently. I fed the bills into the machine with shaking hands. $40 left. The bus was mostly empty. I made my way to the back and collapsed into a seat, hugging the trash bag against my chest. It was the only warm thing I had. Through the window, I watched Naperville blur past. The library where I volunteered. The coffee shop where Lisa and I used to meet for lunch every Tuesday. The park where David proposed to me 43 years ago, down on one knee by the fountain, his hands shaking almost as much as mine were now. All of it slipping away. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. How did Logan foreclose on a house that was paid off? Where did the $850,000 of equity go? And Lisa, my sweet Lisa, how could she throw me out with such venom? The bus drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past strip malls and gas stations and buildings that all looked the same in the gray afternoon light. I watched people going about their normal lives. A mother with 2 kids getting ice cream despite the cold. A couple holding hands. A businessman checking his phone. None of them knew that my life had just ended. The bus driver's voice crackled over the speaker. "End of the line, folks. Oakwood Road." I looked up. We were in a part of town I'd never been to before. Warehouses, chain-link fences, a motel with a flickering neon sign. Sleepy Traveler Motel. Except the M was burned out. OTL. It was perfect. Anonymous. Cheap. A place where no one would know Melissa Harper, award-winning architect. Where no one would recognize the woman whose designs had been featured in Chicago Home and Garden magazine. I pulled the cord and got off at the next stop. The Sleepy Traveler Motel smelled like industrial cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. The paint was peeling off the exterior walls in long, sad strips. 2 rusted pickup trucks sat in the parking lot, and I could hear a TV blaring through one of the thin walls. The clerk was a young man, maybe 25, with headphones around his neck. He barely looked up from his phone when I walked in. "Room for the night," I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. $39 plus tax, he said, still not looking at me. $42.50 total. I counted out my remaining bills on the scratched countertop. 2 20s, 2 1s, $42. I only have 42 even, I said quietly. He finally looked up, really looked at me, at my wet hair, my soaked cardigan, the trash bag I was clutching, the suitcase at my feet. Something changed in his expression, just for a second. "Yeah, okay," he said. 42 works. He handed me a physical key attached to a green plastic diamond. "Room 104, around back." I walked through the sleet to the room. The door was stuck. I had to put my shoulder into it, something that would have been impossible a few years ago, but grief and desperation give you strange strength. The room was freezing. The heater under the window rattled and wheezed, pushing out air that was barely lukewarm. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown. The bedspread looked like it hadn't been washed since the Reagan administration, but it was dry, and it was out of the wind. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress. My knees popped and ached. I was shivering violently, now my whole body shaking. I looked down at the black trash bag I was still clutching. I hated it. I hated everything it represented. My daughter screaming at me. Logan smirking. Mrs. Rodriguez closing her curtains. I was 70 years old and I'd been thrown away like garbage. I should throw this bag away. Right now, walk outside and hurl it into the dumpster I'd seen by the office. I didn't want Lisa's pity trash. I didn't want her cast-offs. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't. The room was 50 degrees at best. I was shivering so hard my teeth were chattering. And through that rip in the bag I could see David's gray cardigan. I couldn't leave his things in a dumpster. Slowly, with fingers that barely worked, I untied the knot at the top of the bag. The plastic tore easily. I reached inside and pulled out the first item. It was David's cardigan. The gray one with pearl buttons. I brought it to my face and inhaled. After 2 years, it still smelled faintly of him. Pipe tobacco he'd quit 20 years ago, but the scent lingered in his favorite clothes. An Old Spice aftershave. The same kind he'd worn since we were dating in college. My hand started shaking for a different reason. I pulled out another item. A pair of flannel work pants stained at the knees from where he used to kneel in the garden. Then his favorite Sunday shirt, the blue one I'd given him for his 65th birthday. These weren't random clothes. These were David's most treasured things. The clothes he'd lived in. The clothes that held his memory. Why would Lisa do this? Why would she taunt me with memories of the man we both loved? I dug deeper into the bag, looking for something that might fit me, something I could wear for warmth. The bag was packed tight, stuffed full. That's when my fingers brushed against something hard, something rectangular, not fabric. I pushed the clothes aside and peered into the bottom of the bag. Taped to the bottom with layers and layers of silver duct tape was a shoebox, an old work boot box, battered and worn. I stared at it, my brain struggling to understand. Why would Lisa tape a shoebox to the bottom of a trash bag full of her father's clothes? I tried to pull it out, but the tape was thick, industrial strength. I had to use my fingernails, breaking 2 of them, peeling back edge after edge. It took 5 full minutes of struggling my breath, making clouds in the freezing air before I finally ripped the box free. It was heavier than it should have been. I sat on the bed holding the box in my lap. My heart was beating faster now, though I didn't know why. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe it was the strange feeling that I was missing something important. I peeled off the remaining tape that held the lid down. Then I opened it. The first thing I saw was money. Not a little money. Stacks of it. Not neat bank-wrapped stacks, but bundles of bills held together with rubber bands. 10s, 20s, 50s. Old bills, worn bills. The kind of money you get from garage sales or selling things online for cash. I stared at it, my mouth literally hanging open. With shaking hands, I picked up one bundle and counted it. $500 in 20s. There were dozens of bundles. I did a quick mental calculation. $20,000, maybe more, in cash, hidden in a garbage bag that my daughter threw at me. Where did Lisa get this money? Why did she give it to me? And why did she throw it at me in a trash bag while screaming that I was garbage? None of it made sense. I set the cash aside on the stained bedspread. Underneath the money was something else. A small blue book. I recognized it immediately. A passbook savings account. The kind banks hardly use anymore. Most people do everything online now, but some of the older banks still offer them. I opened it. The name on the account was Melissa Harper. My name, but I'd never opened an account at Delaware Trust Bank. I did all my banking at First National. I flipped to the last entry, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the little book. The date was 3 years ago, just 1 week before David died. The final balance was $700,000. I gasped out loud. The sound echoed in the empty motel room. $700,000, plus the $20,000 in cash on the bed. That was $720,000. I sat there holding that little blue book, unable to process what I was seeing. This was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. This was a fortune. And suddenly memories started flooding back, sharp and painful like ice melting and cutting. I remembered David sitting at the kitchen table late at night, his laptop open, selling things online. "What are you doing?" I'd ask, bringing him tea. "Just selling some of those antiques we collected over the years," he'd say with a smile. Putting a little aside for a rainy day, Mel. I thought he meant a few $100s, maybe 1,000. Enough for an emergency. I remembered him warning me about Logan, about 6 months before he died when Lisa first started dating him. I don't trust that smile, Mel, David had said. We were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. It doesn't reach his eyes. Watch him. Don't let him near the deed to the house. I'd dismissed his concerns. He's just confident, honey. He's successful. Lisa's happy. That's what matters. Just promise me, David had insisted, squeezing my hand. Promise me you'll be careful with the house, with our assets. Don't sign anything without reading it 3 times. I'd promised. And then David died, and I was so lost in grief that I couldn't see straight. When Logan came to me with those papers 3 years ago, I didn't read them 3 times. I didn't read them at all. I remembered that day now, sitting in Logan's office downtown. It was a week after the funeral. I was still wearing black, still crying at random moments. Logan had poured me expensive scotch. He'd been so kind, so concerned. Melissa, you're grieving. You shouldn't have to worry about property taxes and maintenance bills and all the legal paperwork that comes with owning a home. Let me help you. It's just a power of attorney for tax purposes. You can focus on healing. I'll handle the burden. I'd signed everything he put in front of me. The grief was like a blanket over my mind, muffling everything. But they hadn't been tax forms. They'd been a transfer of the deed. A complete power of attorney that gave Logan control over all my assets. Permission to sell everything I owned. I'd given him the keys to my life, and he'd used them to throw me away. But David had known. Somehow David had known. And 3 years before Logan's betrayal, my brilliant husband had set up this account. Put my name on it. Funneled money from selling our antiques things we'd collected over 40 years of marriage. Built me a life raft while I was too busy trusting the shark. Tears were streaming down my face, now hot against my cold skin. "Oh, David," I whispered to the empty room. "You tried to save me." I looked back into the box. There was one more thing, a piece of paper folded into a small square. It looked like the back of an electric bill, the edges torn. I unfolded it carefully. The writing was in bright red lipstick, smudged in places like it had been written in a hurry. Maybe in a bathroom, maybe in a closet where she thought Logan wouldn't see. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Lisa's. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the words, but I forced myself to focus. "Mom, don't trust anything you saw today. Logan has bugs in the house, cameras in the living room. He knows everything we say." My skin crawled. Bugs, cameras, in my own home. He thinks you're broke. He thinks he won, but he doesn't know about this account. Dad set this up 10 years ago, made me promise to keep it secret until you really needed it. He knew, Mom. Dad knew Logan would try to take everything. I had to stop reading. A sob tore out of my throat. David. My sweet, brilliant David. He'd seen what I was too blind to see, and he'd protected me from beyond the grave. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. Logan is in bad trouble, Mom. Gambling debts. He owes money to dangerous people. He sold the house to pay them, but it's not enough. Monday, he's filing papers to declare you incompetent. State psychiatric facility in Joliet. He wants the life insurance policy he took out on you. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Life insurance on me, the state facility in Joliet. I'd heard of that place. It was a warehouse for people society had given up on. People went there to die. Logan was going to lock me away in that place and wait for me to die so he could collect insurance money. The lipstick writing became more frantic toward the end, the letters larger, more desperate. This money is yours, untraceable. He doesn't know it exists. Don't call me. He checks phone records. Take this. Hire the meanest lawyer you can find. Destroy him. Mom, I love you. L. The word destroy was written with such force that the lipstick had broken, leaving a red smear across the paper. I lowered the note slowly. Lisa hadn't betrayed me. She was trapped in that house with a monster. She'd had to scream at me, throw garbage at me, make it look real for Logan's cameras and bugs. She'd hidden $720,000 in a trash bag because who checks garbage? My daughter had been protecting me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I thought she hated me, she'd been fighting for me, risking everything to get this money to me without Logan knowing. I thought about her face on that porch, the wild, desperate look in her eyes, the way her voice had cracked when she screamed at me. She'd been terrified, and she'd been brave. I stood up and walked to the dirty mirror hanging over the dresser. I looked at my reflection in the dim light from the one lamp that worked. I saw a 70-year-old woman with wet gray hair, red, swollen eyes, still wearing that soaked blue cardigan. I saw someone who'd been beaten down, kicked to the curb, left for dead. But as I stared into my own eyes, I saw something else starting to burn. A spark that had been dormant since David died. I was the woman who'd designed homes that still stood strong 30 years later, who'd negotiated with contractors and city inspectors and building codes, who'd built things that lasted. Logan Sullivan thought I was a senile old fool. He thought I was trash to be discarded. He thought he'd won. I picked up one of the stacks of 20s and squeezed it until my knuckles turned white. He was wrong. I wasn't trash. I was a mother. I was a widow. And now I was a woman with $720,000 and a roadmap to my enemy's destruction. I carefully placed the money back in the box. I put the passbook in my cardigan pocket right next to my heart. I folded the note and tucked it into my shoe where it would stay safe. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I had work to do. Monday was 3 days away. Logan was planning to end my life on Monday to have me declared incompetent and locked away. But by Monday, I was going to be the one ending his. I turned off the flickering overhead light and sat in the darkness. Outside, the motel sign flashed red through the thin curtains. I watched the snow fall past the window. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the cold. I felt the fire, and it was burning hot. The first thing I did Thursday morning was drown my phone. I know that sounds dramatic, but Lisa's note had been clear. Logan was monitoring everything. Phone records, text messages, probably my location too. I stood in that dingy motel bathroom looking at my iPhone, the one Lisa had given me for my 68th birthday, teaching me patiently how to text and FaceTime. My hands hovered over the toilet tank. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered as if Lisa could hear me. Then I powered it down and dropped it into the tank. Let Logan track me to room 104 of the Sleepy Traveler Motel. By the time anyone checked, I'd be long gone. I counted out $500 from one of the cash bundles and tucked it into my wallet. The rest went back into the shoebox, which I buried deep in my suitcase under David's clothes. At 6 in the morning, I walked 3 blocks through the freezing wind to a 24-hour Walmart. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness outside. A few tired-looking workers restocked shelves while a handful of early shoppers pushed carts through the aisles. I bought a burner phone, the kind they show in crime dramas. $30. A map of Illinois because I didn't trust GPS anymore. $8. A plain black baseball cap and cheap sunglasses. $15. The cashier, a woman about my age with kind eyes, rang up my purchases without comment. But as I turned to leave, she said softly, "You take care of yourself, honey." I looked back at her, startled. She gave me a small nod, and I wondered what she saw. A woman on the run, someone in trouble, or just another person doing their best to survive. "Thank you," I managed. "You too." Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, gray dawn over a gray parking lot. I pulled the cap low over my eyes and started walking. My next stop was a place called Rent-A-Wreck. The name was literal. It was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, and the cars in the lot looked like they'd seen better decades. The owner was a man in his 60s with an unlit cigar clamped between his teeth. The nameplate on his desk said Sal. "Need something that runs," I said. "Cash deposit. No questions." Sal looked at me over his reading glasses. He'd probably seen 1,000 people like me, people who needed to disappear for a while. "Got a 2005 Ford Taurus," he said. "Smells like cigarettes and the heater rattles, but she'll get you where you need to go. 500 deposit, 50 a day. I counted out the bills. He handed me the keys without asking for ID. "Good luck, ma'am," he said, and something in his tone made me think he meant it. The Taurus was ugly beige and battered with a pine air freshener that didn't quite cover the stale tobacco smell. But when I turned the key, the engine started. For the first time in 3 years, I was making my own decision. Not asking Logan for permission, not waiting for an allowance. I was driving my own car on my own terms. I felt a strange surge of power as I pulled out of that lot. Small, yes, fragile maybe, but it was mine. I drove west for 40 minutes, following the map I'd spread across the passenger seat. The suburbs gave way to strip malls, then to the kind of carefully manicured developments where people went to age gracefully. Shady Oaks Retirement Community. The name sounded pleasant, peaceful. But I knew better. It was a high-end waiting room, a place where people went when their families didn't want to deal with them anymore, but had enough money to ease their guilt. My friend Ben Stone lived here. Ben and I had met 20 years ago at a charity auction. I was there representing my architecture firm bidding on dinner with the mayor. Ben was there defending a union boss accused of embezzlement. We'd ended up at the same table, and he'd made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my wine. "You ever need someone buried in paperwork?" he'd said, handing me his card. "You call me." We'd played bridge together every Wednesday for 15 years. When David died, Ben had been one of the few people who didn't treat me like I was broken. He'd just shown up at my door with a bottle of good bourbon and let me cry without trying to fix anything. Then 3 years ago, he'd had a stroke. His daughter moved him to Shady Oaks. I visited when I could, but Logan always made it difficult. "He's confused, Melissa. You're just upsetting him." Another lie. I found Ben in the common room staring blankly at a television playing a game show at maximum volume. He was in a wheelchair now, a plaid blanket tucked around his knees. He looked older than I remembered. Frailer. My heart sank. Had I come too late? Was his mind gone? "Ben?" I said softly, touching his shoulder. He turned his head slowly. His eyes were cloudy, unfocused. Then, like a light switching on, they sharpened. He blinked once, twice. A slow grin spread across his face. "Melissa Harper." He rasped his voice like gravel in a mixer. "I thought you were dead. You look like hell." I actually laughed for the first time in days. "I feel like hell, Ben. I need your help." His grin widened. "Well, pull up a chair, sweetheart. This is the most interesting thing that's happened to me since they changed the pudding flavor." I told him everything. The eviction, the trash bag, the money, Lisa's note. As I talked, Ben transformed. The lethargy of the nursing home seemed to evaporate. He sat up straighter. His eyes got sharper. By the time I showed him the passbook and the stack of cash, he looked like the lawyer who used to terrify prosecutors in court. "David set this up," he muttered, running his thumb over the passbook. "Smart man. Always liked him." He looked up at me. "This isn't just savings, Mel. Look at the deposits. They're structured. Small amounts, regular intervals. He was selling those antiques online, right? Funneling the profits here, keeping it off the books." "Why?" I asked. "Why go through all this?" "Because he saw Logan coming." Ben tapped the passbook. "Your husband built you a life raft while you were busy trusting the shark. This account is in your name only. No joint access, no power of attorney can touch it. It's yours clean and clear." He wheeled himself over to a small desk in the corner of his room and pulled out a laptop. It looked surprisingly modern for a nursing home. "You think I just sit here and play bingo?" he said, catching my expression. "I've still got friends, Mel. Eyes and ears in the city. You want to know who Logan Sullivan really is? Let's find out." For the next 4 hours, I watched a master at work. Ben made calls, his voice commanding respect even over the phone. He typed furiously, accessing databases I didn't know existed. He barked orders at private investigators and old contacts at the county clerk's office. I sat on the edge of his bed eating tasteless gelatin a nurse had brought, waiting for the verdict. Around 2 in the afternoon, Ben stopped typing. He spun his wheelchair around to face me, and his expression made my stomach drop. "It's worse than we thought, Mel," he said quietly. "Much worse." Ben slid a printed document across his desk. I picked it up with shaking hands. "Logan Sullivan isn't a real estate tycoon," Ben began. "He's a fraud. He hasn't closed a legitimate deal in 18 months. That fancy office downtown leased. He's 3 months behind on rent. The car's leased and in danger of repossession. The man is drowning in debt." He tapped another piece of paper. "But that's just the surface. Your son-in-law has a gambling problem. Not poker or horses crypto casinos. Unregulated offshore gambling sites. He's been bleeding money for 2 years chasing his losses." My mouth went dry. "How much?" "He owes $2.5 million, Melissa." The number was so large it didn't feel real. $2.5 million. "And he doesn't owe it to a bank," Ben continued, his voice grave. "He owes it to a syndicate. Eastern Europeans who run these crypto sites. These aren't people who send collection letters, Mel. These are people who break legs. I felt sick. But the house, I paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. Ben nodded slowly. You did, until 6 months ago. Logan forged your signature on a home equity line of credit. Cashed out 80% of the home's value, $680,000. My contact at the county recorder's office pulled the digital file. The signature is good, but not perfect. The notary seal is fake. He forged... I couldn't finish the sentence. He used the money to pay the interest on his gambling debts. Then he gambled the rest and lost it all. Now the bank is foreclosing because he hasn't made a single payment on the loan he took out in your name. I sat there trying to process. Logan had stolen my home, forged my signature, gambled away nearly $700,000. It gets worse, Ben said quietly. How could it possibly get worse? He handed me another document, a court filing dated for Monday. He's running out of time. The loan sharks are squeezing him. The bank is taking the house. He needs a big payout, and he needs it fast. Ben's jaw tightened. He took out a life insurance policy on you last year, $2 million. The room spun. He wants me dead. Not yet. Too messy, too many questions. No, his plan is more elegant, more cruel. Ben slid the court filing toward me. Emergency petition for guardianship. Claims you have advanced dementia. Claims you're a danger to yourself. He's got a doctor on his payroll who signed an affidavit saying you're mentally incompetent. I looked at the document. In the matter of Melissa Harper petition for involuntary commitment. The hearing is Monday morning, Ben said. If he wins, he gets total control over your person, can put you in a state facility, the cheapest one he can find, can medicate you until you really do lose your mind. Then, when you conveniently pass away from natural causes in 6 months or a year, he cashes the policy and pays off his debts. I stared at the papers in my hands. This was the man who'd eaten at my table, who'd called me Mom, who I'd helped financially when he was starting his business. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was planning to erase me, lock me in a dark room, and wait for me to die. Why did he throw me out Wednesday? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why not just wait until Monday? He needed to create a narrative, Ben explained. A confused old woman wandering the streets. If the police had picked you up that night looking like a vagrant in the freezing cold, it would have been proof for his case. Look, Your Honor, she's homeless, confused, doesn't know where she is. She needs to be institutionalized for her own safety. Rage flooded through me. Pure white-hot rage. I stood up, my hands balling into fists. I want to go back there, I said. I want to... Sit down, Mel. Ben's voice cracked like a whip. You can't beat him with your fists. He's younger and he's desperate. If you touch him, you go to jail and he wins. We have to beat him at his own game. In the courtroom. On the street. I forced myself to sit. My whole body was trembling. What do we do? First, we need evidence. Hard, undeniable evidence. We need the original documents he forged. We need his ledger. We need proof of the gambling debts. And we need it before Monday morning. But his office is locked. He has security. Ben chuckled, and it was not a nice sound. He's a gambler, Mel. Gamblers are sloppy. And you're an architect. You know how buildings work. You know how to get into places people think are secure. He reached into his nightstand and pulled out a bottle of whiskey contraband in a nursing home. He poured 2 shots into plastic cups. You're going undercover, Mel. You're going to walk into the lion's den and steal the evidence that sends him to prison for 20 years. I looked at my old friend, at the file on his lap that detailed the destruction of my life. I picked up the plastic cup. Monday is in 3 days, Ben. Let's get to work. We drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it felt good. It felt like fuel. Logan Sullivan wanted to declare me incompetent, wanted to say I was a confused old woman. He was about to find out just how sharp this old woman could be. Friday morning, I stood in an alley behind a hardware store, pulling a zipper up to my chin. The gray coveralls scratched against my neck. They smelled like someone else's sweat and industrial detergent. Ben had gotten the uniform from a contact, someone who ran a cleaning crew for downtown high-rises. The coveralls, a faded blue cap, and a pair of heavy work boots from a thrift store. In my hands, I held a plastic spray bottle filled with blue window cleaner and a rag that had seen better days. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror of the Ford Taurus. I barely recognized myself. Just another invisible worker. The kind of person people look through, not at. Perfect. Ben had done his homework. The regular cleaning crew for Logan's building took their lunch break between noon and 1. That was my window. 60 minutes to break into my son-in-law's office, steal evidence, and get out before anyone realized I wasn't supposed to be there. If I got caught, Logan would have everything he needed. He'd call the police, tell them his senile mother-in-law had finally snapped. I'd be committed by sunset. I drove the Taurus into the city, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I'd designed skyscrapers in this city, had walked steel beams 50 stories up when I was younger and fearless. Heights had never scared me. Hard work had never scared me. But this terrified me. The Pearson Tower was glass and steel, all sharp angles and expensive finishes. The kind of building that screamed success. Men in $3,000 suits walked briskly through the marble lobby, talking into earpieces. I parked 3 blocks away and walked head down, clutching my cleaning supplies like a shield. The lobby was an ocean of polished brass and imported marble. I kept my eyes on the floor, shoulders slumped. Just a tired working woman. Nobody worth noticing. The security guard glanced up from his monitors as I approached. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I gave him a weary nod. One working person acknowledging another. He didn't even blink. Just buzzed me through. I was in. The service elevator was hidden behind a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. I pressed the button for the 14th floor and watched the numbers climb. 10, 11, 12. I checked the button recorder. Ben had given me a tiny device taped to my chest under the coveralls. The little red light was blinking. It was recording. The doors opened on 14. The office was quiet. Too quiet. The reception desk was empty. Lisa's friend Sarah must be at lunch, just like Ben said she would be. I walked quickly across the plush carpet, my work boots silent. Straight to Logan's corner office. The door was unlocked. Arrogance. He thought he was untouchable, smarter than everyone else. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. The same scent that had made me nauseous when he kicked me out. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, but I didn't have time to appreciate the view. I went straight for the trash can. A sleek stainless steel bin under his mahogany desk. Inside was a pile of shredded paper. Cross-cut shreds, but I could see fragments. A notary seal cut in half. A signature that looked like mine sliced into ribbons. He'd been practicing, destroying the drafts of the forged documents. I pulled out a large Ziploc bag and stuffed the shredded paper inside. Ben knew someone who could reassemble this. It would take time, but we had the pieces. Next, the computer. I sat in Logan's leather chair. It felt wrong, like sitting on a throne of lies. I woke the screen. Password required. I pulled out the burner phone and called Ben. "I'm in," I whispered. "Need the password." "Try Big Win 88, Ben said. "He uses it for his fantasy football." I typed it in. Access denied. "Try Winter 2024. Denied. My palms were sweating inside the rubber gloves. The clock on the wall showed 12:17. I'd been inside for 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. "Think Mel," Ben said in my ear. "He's a narcissist. What does he love? Money. Try millionaire." Denied. I looked around the desk. There was a framed photo of Lisa smiling, unaware that her husband was a monster. "Try Lisa, my love," I said, feeling sick. The screen unlocked. He'd used my daughter's name as the key to the machine he was using to destroy her inheritance. I plugged in the USB drive Ben had given me. It was loaded with a script that would automatically copy his browser history, downloads folder, and accounting software files. A progress bar appeared. Downloading. 20%. I tapped my foot nervously. Watched the door. 40%. Come on. Then I heard it. The ding of the elevator down the hall. I froze. Click, click, click. High heels on marble. Someone was coming back early. 60%. The footsteps stopped at the reception desk. I heard the sound of mail being sorted. Then the footsteps started again. Coming down the hallway. Coming toward the executive suites. 80%. My hand hovered over the USB drive, ready to yank it out. 90%. The footsteps were right outside the door. 95%. The door handle started to turn. I yanked the USB drive out just as the screen flashed complete. Shoved it into my pocket. Grabbed my spray bottle. The door opened. I dove toward the closet in the corner, pulling it shut just as someone walked into the office. I was in pitch blackness, squeezed between golf clubs and winter coats. I held my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth to stifle any sound. "Hello," a woman's voice. Sarah, the receptionist. "Mr. Sullivan, are you back?" Silence. She walked into the room. I heard her set something on the desk. Mail, probably. She paused. "Please don't notice the chair is turned. Please don't notice the monitor is warm." The phone on the desk rang shrill and jarring. She didn't answer it. Just walked out, closing the door behind her. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I reached for the closet door handle to escape. The office door opened again. Harder this time. Heavier footsteps. Logan. He was back. I shrank back into the coats. If he opened this closet, if he found me dressed like a janitor with his stolen data in my pocket, there would be no talking my way out. I fumbled for the button recorder, making sure it was still running. The red light blinked steadily. I heard Logan pacing. His breathing was ragged, harsh. He sounded like a cornered animal. He picked up the phone and dialed. Pick up, pick up," he muttered. Someone answered. "Tony, look, I know I'm late. I know. Please just listen to me." Silence as he listened to whoever was on the other end. No, please don't send anyone to the house. Lisa is there. She knows nothing about this. This is between you and me." My blood ran cold. He was talking to the loan sharks. The people Ben said break legs. "I have the solution," Logan said, his voice rising with desperation. "It's done. I have a buyer for the house. Yes, the Naperville house. We're closing this afternoon. Friday afternoon. Friday. Today. In a few hours." "Yes, I know it's worth $850, Logan continued. "But I'm selling it for $600. Quick sale. House flippers. They're bringing a cashier's check. I'll have your money by 5 p.m. today. I swear, Tony. Just call off your dogs." He was selling my home, throwing away $250,000 in equity just to get cash fast. But what he said next made me forget about the house. "Yeah, the old woman is handled. No, she won't be a problem. She's homeless right now, wandering the streets. But come Monday, she's gone for good." Logan laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound I'd heard before. "I have the paperwork, Tony. Doctor signed the affidavit this morning. Dementia, advanced, aggression. She's going to the state facility in Joliet, lockup ward. Once she's in the system, she loses all legal rights, becomes a ward of the state, and I remain her power of attorney." I pressed my ear against the wood of the closet door, tears of rage stinging my eyes. "And the best part?" Logan's voice took on a gleeful tone. "The insurance. $2 million, but I have to wait 6 months for the natural causes payout. So she just has to survive 6 months in there. I figure the food or the stress will kill her by then anyway. It's a win-win." He hung up. I stood in that darkness, shaking, not from fear anymore, from a hatred so pure it felt like it could burn the building down. I heard him pour a drink, the clink of glass on crystal, then a long sigh. "Sarah," he yelled, "I'm going to the restroom. Hold my calls." The door opened and closed. I counted to 5. Then I burst out of the closet. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I didn't care about the janitor act. I ran, out the side door of the office, into the fire escape stairwell. I didn't wait for the elevator. I ran down 14 flights of concrete stairs, my boots thudding against the steps. My heart pounding in my ears. My lungs burned. My old knees screamed in protest. But I didn't stop. I burst out into the alleyway, gasping for air. The cold winter air hit my sweaty face like a slap. I stripped off the gray coveralls right there, revealing my regular clothes underneath. Threw the cap into a dumpster. I walked as fast as I could to the Ford Taurus. Got in. Locked the doors. Sat there hyperventilating. Then I pulled out the recorder and pressed rewind. Then play. Logan's voice, tiny but crystal clear, filled the car. "She's going to the state facility in Joliet. Once she's in the system, she loses all legal rights." I had him. I had his confession. I had proof of the gambling debts. I had proof of the fraud. But I also had a new deadline. Logan was selling my house today. Friday afternoon. In a few hours. If that sale went through, I'd lose the house forever. Even if I sent Logan to prison later, the house would be gone, sold to a third party who bought it legally. I looked at the dashboard clock. 1:47 p.m. I didn't know exactly when the closing was, but it had to be soon. I started the car. I wasn't going back to the motel. I was going back to Ben. We had the evidence. Now we needed a plan to spring the trap before Logan sold everything out from under me. I burst through the door of Ben's room at Shady Oaks, still breathless from the drive. He looked up from his laptop, took one look at my face, and wheeled himself toward me. "You got it," he said. It wasn't a question. I pulled out the recorder with shaking hands and pressed play. Logan's voice filled the small room, cold and calculating, planning my imprisonment and death. When it finished, Ben sat back in his wheelchair, his expression grim. "That's enough to bury him. Wire fraud, elder abuse conspiracy to commit insurance fraud forgery." He paused. "But there's a problem." "The house closing," I said. "He's selling it today, this afternoon." Ben nodded slowly. "If that sale goes through, getting the house back will take years of litigation. Even with all this evidence, even if we send Logan to prison, the buyer is an innocent third party. We need to stop the transaction before it happens. Can we call the police, show them the evidence?" "Too slow and too risky. If Logan gets wind that we're onto him, he might destroy the original forged documents. We need those originals, Mel. The recording helps, but a good lawyer could argue it was taken without his knowledge, challenge its admissibility. We need the paper trail." I sank into the chair beside his bed. "So what do we do?" Ben was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the armrest of his wheelchair. Then his eyes lit up. "We need to know exactly when and where that closing is happening. And we need to get a message to Lisa without Logan knowing. How he monitors everything. Phone records, texts. Not everything," Ben said with a slight smile. "He can't monitor what he doesn't recognize as a message." That's when I remembered. A small detail from years ago, before Logan had become this monster. Back when Lisa was still in college and Logan was just the new boyfriend. "Pizza," I said suddenly. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Come again." "When Lisa first started dating Logan, we had this running argument about pizza toppings. Logan was a purist meat lover or plain cheese. He hated anything else, called it garbage pizza. But Lisa and I had a secret favorite, pepperoni and pineapple." I could see the memory clearly now. Lisa and I sitting at the kitchen table sharing a pizza while Logan was out. "Don't tell him," Lisa had giggled. "He'll give us a lecture about respecting the integrity of Italian cuisine." "He refused to even be in the same room when we ate it," I continued. "If a pepperoni and pineapple pizza shows up at the house right now, Logan won't touch it. He'll be disgusted. But Lisa will know immediately that it came from me." Ben's grin widened. "It's a Trojan horse. I like it. What's the message?" I thought for a moment. "We need her to know help is coming, that she should be ready." I grabbed a piece of paper from Ben's desk. "Tell the pizza place to write on the inside of the box lid, 'The trash truck is coming Friday.'" "Trash truck," Ben repeated, nodding appreciatively. "Because you found the money in the trash bag. She'll understand." Within minutes, Ben had found a local Naperville pizzeria online and made the call. Large pepperoni and pineapple pizza delivery to my old address. Special instructions for the message inside the lid. "Name for the order?" the teenager on the phone asked. Ben looked at me. I thought of David, of how he'd always called me Mel, but everyone else used Melissa. "Put it under Hal," I said. David's nickname was Harold. Everyone called him Hal. We paid with a prepaid credit card Ben had set up. Then we waited. Waiting was agony. I paced Ben's small room watching the clock. 2:15, 2:30, 2:45. At 2:47 p.m., Ben's laptop pinged. "I hacked into the cloud backup of Logan's security system last night," Ben explained, turning the screen toward me. "It's a violation of about 6 laws, but at this point, who's counting? The grainy footage showed the living room of my house. My house that wasn't mine anymore. The furniture was all wrong. Logan had redecorated, of course. Sleek and modern, where David and I had chosen warm and traditional. A figure appeared in the frame. Logan holding a pizza box like it was contaminated. His face was twisted in disgust. He was shouting something. There was no audio on this feed, and gesturing angrily. Then Lisa appeared. She took the box from him, looking confused. She opened it. I held my breath. Lisa stared at the inside of the lid for a long moment. Her whole body went still. Then very slowly she looked up directly at the camera, as if she knew I was watching from across the city. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just gave the smallest nod I'd ever seen. Then she closed the box and walked toward the kitchen out of frame. "She knows," I whispered. "She got the message." 10 minutes later, Ben pulled up Logan's text messages, syncing to the cloud just like everything else in his digital life. A new message to someone named Tony. Wife is losing it. Hysterical about the move. Packing everything like a maniac. Staying at office until closing. Can't deal with the noise. I felt a fierce pride in my daughter. She was playing her part perfectly, making Logan want to stay away from the house, clearing the path for whatever came next. Now, Ben said, closing his laptop, we need to talk about the main problem. How do we stop this house sale? Ben wheeled himself to his desk and pulled out a file folder that looked like it had been assembled in a hurry. I've been thinking about this all morning. We can't just file an injunction. Even with evidence of fraud, a court order to stop the sale could take 48 hours to process. We don't have 48 hours. So we let him sell it. My voice cracked. No, we cut off his oxygen. We take away his reason for selling. Ben opened the folder. Logan's selling the house because he needs cash to pay off the loan sharks. But what if those loan sharks weren't a problem anymore? I don't understand. In the world of high-risk lending, Ben explained, leaning forward with the intensity I remembered from his courtroom days, debt is a commodity. It can be bought and sold like a used car. Logan owes $2.5 million to a syndicate that runs those crypto casinos. But to them, he's toxic. 2 years late, 0 assets, in his name, high risk of default or death. If he goes to prison or flees the country, they get nothing. I was starting to see where he was going. So to them, getting a portion of the debt is better than nothing. Exactly. Getting 50 cents on the dollar is a dream. Getting 20 cents is better than 0. Ben pulled out another document. This is Apex Asset Management. It's the shell company the syndicate uses to hold their bad debts. Legally, they're a collections agency. I know the lawyer who represents them. We can make them an offer. My stomach tightened. An offer? We buy Logan's debt, Mel. All of it. If we own the note, we become his creditor. We step into the shoes of the loan sharks. We can freeze the house sale not as a family dispute, but as a secured creditor exercising our legal rights. The implications crashed over me like a wave. How much would that cost? I'm going to offer them $500,000, cash, immediate wire transfer, for the entire $2.5 million debt. $500,000, more than half of what David had saved, what he'd hidden away to protect me, my safety net for old age. I couldn't finish. A lot of money, Ben said quietly. I know, but think about what you get, Mel. You own Logan's debt. You have a lien on any assets he might have now or in the future. You can walk into that closing and legally seize the check before it ever touches his hands. And more importantly, you take away his leverage. He can't sell the house to pay off the syndicate if you are the syndicate. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was starting to fall, soft white flakes drifting down like ash. I thought about the house, the oak tree Lisa and I had planted, the kitchen where David had taught her to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, the porch where I'd sat with him on summer evenings watching the fireflies. I thought about Logan's plan. Lock me in a facility and wait for me to die. I thought about Lisa trapped in that house with a monster throwing a trash bag at me to save my life. This isn't about the money anymore, I said, turning back to Ben. It's about taking back control. Do it. Buy the debt. Ben picked up his phone and dialed. He put it on speaker. A smooth voice answered. Morrison and Associates. This is Benjamin Stone. I need to speak with Richard Morrison about acquiring a distressed asset. Mr. Stone. The voice paused, recognition dawning. Haven't heard from you since the Teamsters trials. I heard you'd retired. Retired, not dead, Richard. I'm representing a private investor interested in the obligations of one Logan Sullivan. A dry chuckle came through the speaker. Sullivan, that deadbeat owes us $2.5 million. He's underwater stone. Why would anyone want that toxic waste? My client specializes in high-risk recovery, Ben lied smoothly. Believes she can squeeze blood from a stone. We're offering $500,000 cash wired today. Take it or leave it. Silence on the line. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. That's 20 cents on the dollar, Richard finally said. It's 20 cents more than you'll get when he goes to prison or gets his legs broken by someone else you sold the debt to, Ben countered. I've seen his financials, Richard. The man is done. This is a gift. Wait 1 minute. The line went to hold music. Classical piano. Mozart, I thought. David would have known for sure. I sat back down. My hands were shaking. $500,000. If they said yes, I'd be left with about $200,000 from David's account. Enough to live on, but not the comfortable retirement we'd planned. The line clicked back. "We accept," Richard Satsy said. "Wire instructions are being sent to your encrypted email now. Once the funds clear, the promissory note and all attached liens are yours. Pleasure doing business with you, Ben." The line went dead. Ben looked at me. "It's done. Now we need to wire the money." An hour later, I sat in a private banking office at First National, trying to look like a woman who routinely moved $500,000. The personal banker was a young woman named Jennifer, maybe 30, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. She looked at my ID, then at the Delaware Trust passbook, then back at me. "Ms. Harper, this is a significant amount. I need to ask what's the purpose of this wire transfer. I'd rehearsed this with Ben. It's an investment. Real estate." She studied me for a moment. I wondered what she saw. A 70-year-old woman in a thrift store jacket asking to wire $500,000 to a company called Apex Asset Management. "I need to verify a few things," she said carefully. "This is for your protection, you understand. We have protocols for large transfers, especially for," she paused delicately, "senior clients." Senior clients. Code for making sure you're not being scammed. Under normal circumstances, I would have appreciated the caution, but today every minute counted. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm making this transfer of my own free will. I've consulted with my attorney, Benjamin Stone. You can call him if you'd like to verify." I slid Ben's card across the desk. She picked it up, looked at it, then at me again. "Stone and Associates," she read. "He's your lawyer, for 20 years. Something shifted in her expression. Maybe it was the mention of Ben's name. He'd been legendary in Chicago legal circles. Maybe it was the steadiness in my voice. Whatever it was, she nodded. "I'll need you to sign here, here, and here." I signed. "Melissa Harper." 3 times. With the stroke of a pen, $500,000 vanished into the digital ether. Money David had carefully saved over a decade. Money he'd hidden away selling our antiques and treasures so that I'd be safe. I hoped he'd understand what I was doing with it. "The wire has been sent," Jennifer said. "It should clear within an hour." I stood up to leave, then paused. "Thank you for checking, for making sure I wasn't being taken advantage of. The world needs more people like you." She smiled a real smile this time. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Harper." Outside, the snow was falling harder now. I sat in the Ford Taurus in the bank parking lot and called Ben on the burner phone. "It's done," I said. "Good. Richard just confirmed receipt. The debt is officially yours, Mel. As of 3:47 p.m. today, you are Logan Sullivan's largest creditor. You own him." I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes. "What now?" "Now we wait for him to walk into our trap. The closing is at 4:30 at Miller & Associates Title Company on State Street. I've already filed the emergency lien on the property. The title company will see it in their system. Logan's going to walk in expecting a check that'll save his life. And instead he's going to find you." At 4 p.m., I stood in the bathroom of a boutique dress shop in downtown Chicago, looking at myself in a full-length mirror. The charcoal gray suit fit perfectly. The tailor had worked a minor miracle taking in the waist and shoulders in under 2 hours. It was Italian wool beautifully cut with a subtle pinstripe that caught the light. It had cost $2,000. I'd never spent that much on clothing in my life. David and I had believed in living modestly, saving for the future, not showing off. But as I looked at my reflection, I understood why Ben had insisted. The woman in the mirror didn't look like someone who'd been sleeping in a motel. She didn't look like someone who'd been thrown out with a trash bag. She looked like power, success, money. She looked like someone Logan Sullivan should have been afraid to cross. I'd also stopped at a salon. My gray hair was now cut and styled swept back from my face. A light touch of makeup, something I rarely wore, made me look rested instead of exhausted. The final touch was a walking cane, polished hickory with a brass handle. Ben had suggested it as a prop, something to complete the image of the distinguished eccentric investor. But as I held it, I realized it was more than that. It was a weapon if I needed one. I paid cash for everything and walked out onto State Street. The snow had turned to sleet, but I barely felt it. The wool coat I'd bought another extravagance kept me warm. Ben was waiting in a hired car, a black Lincoln Town Car that looked expensive and official. He'd somehow gotten himself out of the nursing home and into the backseat wheelchair, folded in the trunk. "You look like you're about to buy the building," he said with approval. "I'm about to do something better," I replied, sliding in beside him. "I'm about to take back my life." The driver pulled away from the curb. We headed toward State Street, toward Miller & Associates, toward the closing where Logan thought he was selling my house. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. Let him come. Miller & Associates Title Company occupied the third floor of a historic building on State Street. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see the conference room where the closing was happening. Logan sat at the head of a long mahogany table, and even from the hallway I could see he was sweating. His expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation rolling off him in waves. He kept tapping his pen against the leather portfolio in front of him, a nervous staccato that betrayed everything his confident smile tried to hide. Lisa sat beside him, pale and small. Her hands twisted a tissue in her lap. She was playing the part of the distraught wife perfectly. Across from them sat the house flipper, a man in his 40s wearing a cheap suit and an expression of barely concealed greed. This was the vulture Logan had found someone willing to buy a house worth $850,000 for $600,000, no questions asked. The title agent, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, according to the nameplate, was arranging documents. "Just need signatures here, here, and here," Patricia was saying, pointing with a manicured nail. "Then we can release the cashier's check, and this will be complete." Logan reached for the papers, his hand shaking slightly. This was it, the $600,000 that would save him from broken legs, from prison, from everything closing in around him. His pen hovered over the signature line. I pushed the door open. It didn't slam, didn't bang, just swung inward with a smooth, heavy click that somehow commanded everyone's attention. Logan's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table, rolling across the documents and leaving a streak of blue ink. "Mom," he stammered, blinking rapidly like he couldn't process what he was seeing. "What are you? You're supposed to be—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He'd expected a homeless woman, a confused, senile old fool in dirty clothes wandering the streets. He'd expected his plan to have worked. He hadn't expected me to walk in wearing a $2,000 suit. "Hello, Logan," I said calmly. I walked into the room, my new shoes clicking on the hardwood floor, moving with the kind of confidence I'd almost forgotten I had. I walked right past him, ignoring him completely, and pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table. I sat down, unbuttoned my jacket with deliberate, unhurried movements, placed my walking cane against the table where everyone could see it. "I'm not lost," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And I'm certainly not confused." Logan's face flushed an ugly red. He looked at Lisa, but she was staring at her hands, hiding a small smile. "You can't be here," Logan hissed. "We're in the middle of a closing. This is private business. Get out before I call security and have you removed for trespassing." I leaned back in my chair and looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd eaten at my table, who'd called me Mom, who I'd trusted with everything. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Logan. You see, I'm here to buy the house." The house flipper laughed. It was an ugly barking sound. "Get in line, Grandma. We have a contract. Ink's about to be dry. Unless you've got $600,000 in your purse, you're wasting our time." I turned to look at the flipper. He was younger than Logan, maybe 35, with slicked back hair and a gold chain visible under his collar. The kind of man who made money off other people's desperation. "I'm not buying it from you," I said calmly. I shifted my gaze to Logan. "And I'm certainly not buying it from him." Logan looked like he was about to have a stroke. "What are you talking about, you crazy old—" The conference room door opened again, cutting him off. Ben Stone wheeled himself in, and even in a wheelchair he had presence. He'd put on his old courtroom suit, navy pinstripe crisp white shirt, red power tie. He looked like exactly what he was, a lawyer who'd made prosecutors cry. "My client," Ben announced in the voice that had once silenced entire courtrooms, "is not buying the property from you, Mr. Sullivan. She is acquiring the asset." He wheeled to the table and dropped his briefcase with a heavy thud that made the water glasses jump. He opened it and pulled out a thick stack of files. They fanned out across the polished wood like a winning hand of poker. Logan looked down at the files. The color drained from his face instantly, leaving him a sickly gray. On the top file, clearly visible, was a logo. Apex Asset Management. What? Logan's voice came out as a whisper. What is this? Ben's smile was not kind. That Mr. Sullivan is your debt. All of it. The $2.5 million you owe to the gentlemen who run those offshore crypto casinos. The principal, the interest, the penalties, every single cent. Logan's eyes darted to me, terror dawning in them. You bought my debt. I nodded slowly. I did. As of 3:47 p.m. this afternoon, I am the sole owner of your promissory note. I'm your creditor, Logan, and I'm calling in the loan. The room went absolutely silent. Even the flipper had stopped smirking. Patricia, the title agent, was frantically typing on her computer, pulling up the property records. Her eyes widened. There's a lien, she said slowly. Filed at 4:03 p.m. today. Emergency creditor's lien on this property. All proceeds from the sale are to be frozen pending resolution of the outstanding debt, Ben finished. Which I should note Mr. Sullivan is currently unable to pay, meaning this sale cannot proceed. Logan made a sound like a wounded animal. He stared at the cashier's check sitting on the table. $600,000. So close, just inches away. Money that was supposed to save his life. You can't do this, he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. That's my house. I have a buyer. I need that money. You need the money, I said quietly, to pay the people who threatened to break your legs. But you don't owe them anymore, Logan. You owe me. The flipper stood up, buttoning his cheap suit jacket. I'm out. I don't deal with liens and family drama. This is too messy. He grabbed his briefcase. Call me when you sort out your problems. He walked out without looking back, and with him went Logan's escape route. Logan watched him go, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. Then he turned to me, and I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Real fear. Logan stood there trapped and desperate, his eyes darting between me, Ben, the closed door where his buyer had vanished, and the legal documents spread across the table. Then he turned to Lisa. Lisa, he said, and his voice took on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. Baby, please. You have to say something. Your mother has lost her mind. Look at her, she's talking crazy. Buying debt, filing liens. This is elder abuse. This is stop. Lisa's voice was quiet, but it cut through his words like a knife. She stood up, not quickly, not angrily, with a slow, deliberate grace that made everyone in the room pause. She smoothed the front of her dress, a simple black dress I noticed now like she was already in mourning, and looked Logan directly in the eyes. For 10 years, I'd watched my daughter shrink under this man's influence. Watched her voice get quieter, her opinions fewer, her spark dimmer. I'd watched her become a shadow of the vibrant woman she'd been. But the person standing there now wasn't a shadow. She reached into her designer handbag, the one Logan had bought her for their anniversary, probably with money he'd stolen from someone, and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Logan's eyes locked on it. Hope flickered across his face. Maybe he thought she was offering him something. Maybe he thought she still had some asset he could use. Lisa upended the pouch. A ring slid into her palm. Her wedding ring. The massive solitaire diamond that Logan had used to show off his success. The ring he'd proposed with on one knee at that expensive restaurant. The ring that was supposed to prove his love. She held it up to the light. The facets caught the fluorescent bulbs throwing little rainbows across the conference room. Do you know how I found out? Lisa asked, her voice soft but steady. Really found out what kind of man you are. Logan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I took this to the jeweler last week, Lisa continued. I wanted it resized. I've lost so much weight from the stress, from the fear, from walking on eggshells every single day terrified of setting you off. She took a step closer to him. The jeweler laughed at me, Logan. He actually laughed. Do you know what he said? Logan's face had gone from red to white. Lisa, I can explain. He said he doesn't resize costume jewelry. Her voice was getting stronger now, gaining power with every word. He said this is cubic zirconia. A good fake, he told me, but fake. She took another step. You sold my real ring, didn't you? You sold the ring you put on my finger at our wedding, the ring I wore for 10 years, and you replaced it with glass. I was going to buy it back, Logan stammered. You needed to feed it into a crypto casino. Lisa cut him off. You stole from me while I slept. You sold a gift, a symbol of our marriage, to feed your addiction. She pulled her arm back and threw the ring. It wasn't a gentle toss. She put her whole body into it, all the anger and hurt and betrayal of 10 years. The ring hit Logan square in the cheekbone. He stumbled back, hand going to his face. The ring bounced off and clattered onto the mahogany table with a hollow plastic sound that echoed in the silent room. "But that's not even the worst part," Lisa said, and now there were tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears, angry ones. "Do you want to know what the worst part is?" Logan just stared at her, holding his cheek. "The worst part is that you're not just a thief," Lisa said. "You're a fool." She turned to look at me, and the love in her eyes nearly broke me. "Do you remember Wednesday, Logan? Do you remember standing in the doorway of our house making me throw my own mother out into the freezing cold? Do you remember the trash bag?" Understanding was starting to dawn on Logan's face, a horrible, slow realization. "You remember," Lisa said. "You stood there and watched me scream at her, watched me throw garbage at her. You thought it was brilliant. You thought you'd won." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "It wasn't garbage, Logan. That bag was the only thing in our house worth anything." She walked over to where I sat and put her hand on my shoulder. I reached up and covered it with mine. "I didn't throw my mother out," Lisa said, her voice shaking but strong. "I threw her a lifeline. $720,000. Cash in a savings account that Dad set up 10 years ago. He knew. He knew what you were." Logan's mouth fell open. You threw away $700,000. "I didn't throw it away," Lisa said quietly. "I gave it to the person it belonged to. I gave Mom the weapon she needed to destroy you." The look on Logan's face was almost comical. He'd held the winning lottery ticket and ordered it thrown in the trash. He'd watched $720,000 walk down the driveway and hadn't known. "You stupid—" He started, taking a step toward Lisa. I stood up. My hand tightened on the walking cane. "Don't," I said, just one word, but it stopped him cold. "You want to blame someone?" I asked. "Blame yourself. You got greedy, you got sloppy, and you underestimated an old woman." Logan stood there, breathing hard, trapped between the ruins of his plan and the complete destruction of his future. "Now," Ben said, his voice cutting through the tension, "we have two options to discuss. Mr. Sullivan, I suggest you sit down and listen very carefully." Logan sat. He didn't have a choice. The security guards Ben had hired, two serious-looking men in dark suits who'd been waiting in the hall, had positioned themselves by the door. Ben pulled out a fresh set of documents and slid them across the table. "Option A," Ben said in his courtroom voice, "is very simple. We walk out of here and file these documents with the district attorney." He tapped a thick folder. "Wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, identity theft, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, attempted unlawful imprisonment." He let that sink in. "I have the forensic accounting from your computer. I have the shredded documents we reassembled from your trash. I have testimony from the notary whose seal you forged. And most importantly, I have this." Ben pulled out a small digital recorder and pressed play. Logan's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. "She's going to the state facility in Joliet, lockup ward. Once she's in the system, she loses all legal rights. I figure the food or stress will kill her by then anyway. It's a win-win." Ben stopped the recording. "With the amount of money involved and the predatory nature of your crimes, you're looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Mr. Sullivan, you'll be in your 50s when you get out. If you get out." Logan's face had gone gray. I would die in there. You know I would." "I'm not built for Ma." "Then I suggest," Ben interrupted, "you consider option B very carefully." He slid another document across the table. "Option B, you disappear." Logan looked down at the paper. His hands were shaking. "This is an uncontested divorce decree," I said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. "You sign it now. You waive all rights to marital assets, which we both know is nothing since you've gambled everything away. You waive any claim to spousal support. You grant Lisa full custody of your shared accounts." I slid another paper toward him. "This is a confession of judgment. It acknowledges that you owe me $2.5 million. You admit you can't pay it. And you agree that as long as you leave the state of Illinois and never return, I won't actively collect on it." "Leave the state," Logan whispered. "But I don't have any money. My accounts are empty. The car is leased. If I leave, where do I go? How do I reached into my pocket and pulled out a white envelope. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a soft thud. $5,000, I said. Cash. It's enough for a bus ticket and a month in a cheap motel. It's more than the $42 you left me with. Logan stared at the envelope like it was a coiled snake. That's it, he said. 5,000. Do you know what I used to spend on a weekend? I know exactly what you used to spend, I said coldly. You used to spend my money, my equity, my home, my future, and you gambled it all away. Consider yourself lucky I'm giving you anything at all. Logan looked from me to Ben to Lisa, who stood silent with her arms crossed. And if I don't sign? He asked, but there was no real fight in his voice anymore. Then we walk, Ben said simply. We file the charges. You'll be arrested before you reach the parking lot. And Melissa still owns your debt, which means she can freeze any assets you try to acquire for the rest of your natural life. You'll never own anything again. Never have a bank account. Never hold property. Every dollar you earn we can take. Logan picked up the pen with a shaking hand. He signed the divorce papers. His signature was shaky, almost illegible. Then the confession of judgment. Then the agreement to leave Illinois and never return. With each stroke of the pen, I watched him sign away his marriage, his home, his dignity, his future. When he finished, Ben gathered the documents efficiently and checked each signature. It's done, Ben said. Logan stood up slowly. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. He reached for the envelope of cash. One more thing, I said. He froze. Ben wheeled to the corner of the room and picked up something that had been sitting there unnoticed. My old leather suitcase. The one Logan had thrown into the slush 4 days ago. It was still stained with watermarks, still scuffed and battered. You threw this at her on Wednesday, Ben said, holding it out. Seems fitting you should take it with you now. Logan looked at the suitcase. He understood the symbolism, the poetry of it. He'd tried to make me a homeless vagrant, and now he was the one leaving with nothing but a beat-up suitcase and the clothes on his back. He took the handle. His grip was weak. Get out of my sight, I said quietly. He walked to the door. The security guard stepped aside. He looked back once at Lisa, but she'd already turned away. Then he was gone. I stood and walked to the window. 3 stories down, I could see him emerge onto the street. The snow was falling harder now. He stood on the corner for a moment, looking lost and broken. A taxi pulled up. He hesitated, probably realizing a taxi would eat into his $5,000. He waved it away. Then he started walking. Away from the business district. Toward the bus station. Just another anonymous figure in the Chicago snow. I watched until I couldn't see him anymore. It's over, Ben said softly behind me. I turned away from the window. Lisa was crying now, really crying, and I went to her and wrapped my arms around my daughter. I'm sorry, she sobbed into my shoulder. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I had to... Shh, I said, stroking her hair like I used to when she was little. You saved me. You were so brave. I'm so proud of you. We stood there for a long time holding each other while Ben quietly packed up his files and gave us privacy. Finally, Lisa pulled back and wiped her eyes. What now, Mom? I looked at my daughter, at Ben, at Patricia, the title agent who'd been sitting in stunned silence through the whole thing. Now, I said. Now we go home. The drive back to Naperville felt different than any drive I'd taken in 40 years. The snow had turned the suburbs into a winter painting, soft and white and clean. Everything looked new. Everything looked possible. Lisa sat in the passenger seat of the Ford Taurus, clutching her purse. She'd been quiet since we left the title company, processing everything that had happened. I packed some of your things, she said suddenly. Before Wednesday, I hid them in the attic. Your photo album's Dad's tools, some of the furniture Logan wanted to sell. I thought if his plan worked, if he really did have you committed, I'd need to save what I could. My throat tightened. Thank you, sweetheart. I wanted to tell you so many times, she continued, her voice breaking. But he was always watching, always listening. I'd go to call you and remember the phone was monitored. I'd start to write a letter and remember he checked the mail. That note in the trash bag, I wrote it in the Target bathroom, hiding in a stall like a crazy person. You weren't crazy, I said firmly. You were brilliant. You saved my life, Lisa. We pulled into the driveway. My driveway. To my house. The house looked the same from the outside. The oak tree stood tall, its bare branches dusted with snow. The porch light was on. Lisa must have left it on for me. We sat in the car for a moment, neither of us moving. "I don't know if I can go in there," Lisa admitted. "Everything in that house reminds me of him, of being scared, of walking on eggshells." I reached over and took her hand. "Then we'll change it. We'll make it ours again. We'll paint over his choices. We'll rearrange the furniture. We'll fill it with new memories." She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Promise. I promise." We got out of the car and walked to the front door. Lisa unlocked it. She still had her key, and we stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Logan's presence seemed to hang in the air like smoke. But then I noticed little things. The framed photo of David and me on our wedding day, which Logan had hidden away, was back on the mantel. The Afghan my mother had crocheted, which Logan had deemed too shabby, was draped over the couch. The collection of vintage books I'd inherited from my grandmother was back on the shelves. "I put them back," Lisa said softly. "After the pizza came. After I knew you were safe and fighting back. I put back everything of yours he'd hidden." I walked through the room slowly. The kitchen where David and I had shared morning coffee. The study where he'd read his engineering journals. The bedroom where we'd talked late into the night about our dreams. It wasn't the same. Logan had changed so much. But underneath his superficial renovations, the bones of the house remained. The structure David and I had built together. This was still my home. It was a Tuesday afternoon, cold and rainy, when Ben called. I was in the kitchen, which Lisa and I had decided to paint a sunny yellow like the one in my childhood home, stirring a pot of soup. "Turn on your computer," Ben said without preamble. "I'm sending you something." I wiped my hands and opened my laptop. An email from Ben appeared with an attachment. A news article. The headline read, "Illinois man arrested in Las Vegas credit card fraud scheme." My hands started shaking as I read. Logan Sullivan, 38, had been arrested trying to run a credit card skimming operation out of a motel room in Las Vegas. He'd been caught using a cloned card to buy gas at a convenience store. When the police ran his information, multiple warrants from Illinois had appeared in the system. The article included a mugshot. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinner, his face gaunt. His eyes were empty, dead things. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his pale skin. "He's being extradited back to Illinois," Ben said. "Federal charges for the wire fraud and identity theft, plus whatever they charge him with in Nevada. The DA here isn't offering any deals. With everything we gave them, the recordings, the forged documents, the paper trail, he's looking at 20 years minimum." I stared at the screen. This was the man who'd eaten Sunday dinners at my table, who'd called me Mom, who I'd trusted with my life. "Does Lisa know?" I asked. I called her first. She said, Ben paused. She said she felt relief, that it's really over now. He can't hurt anyone anymore. After we hung up, I sat in my sunny yellow kitchen for a long time looking at that mug shot. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt tired and sad. And grateful it was finally over. Then I stood up, closed the laptop, and went back to making soup. Lisa was coming over for dinner. We were going to talk about repainting the living room and maybe getting a dog. We were going to talk about the future. A month after Logan's arrest, I stood in my garage, which I'd converted into a workshop just like David had always wanted to do, looking at my latest project. It hung on the wall above my workbench, protected by museum-quality glass in a custom frame I'd designed myself. Inside, mounted against black velvet, was a black heavy-duty trash bag, torn at the side, wrinkled and ugly. Most people would have thrown it away, burned it, tried to forget the worst day of their lives. But I'd kept it. I'd framed it. Lisa had been confused when she saw it. "Mom, why would you want to remember that?" But she didn't understand. Not yet. I reached out and touched the glass, my fingers tracing the outline of the bag. To Logan, it had been garbage. Something to discard. Something worthless, just like he'd thought I was. But to me, that bag contained the most valuable things in the world. It held David's foresight and love, protecting me from beyond the grave. It held Lisa's courage, risking everything to save me. It held my salvation and my strength. That bag had been my shield, my sword, my life raft through the storm. People say one man's trash is another man's treasure. Standing there in my workshop, I knew it was the truest thing ever written. I turned away from the shadow box. The past was framed and hanging where it belonged, behind me. I walked out of the garage and around to the front of the house. Lisa was there wearing old jeans and one of my flannel shirts 3 sizes too big. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She had a smear of paint on her cheek. She was standing by the front door, the door Logan had slammed in my face, the door that had been a barrier between us. We'd stripped off the black paint he'd chosen. The wood underneath was bare and ready. "Ready, Mom?" Lisa asked, holding up a can of paint. I smiled. "Ready." We'd chosen the color together. Not black, not gray. A deep, vibrant red. The color of life, of warmth, of coming home. I dipped my brush into the can. Lisa did the same. Side by side, mother and daughter, we began to paint. We covered the scars of the past with fresh, bright color. We reclaimed our entrance. We reclaimed our home. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The snow was gone. Winter was over. And as I watched the red paint cover the wood, I knew we were going to be all right. We were the Harpers. We'd walked through fire and come out the other side, not as ash, but as gold. I looked at Lisa. She caught my eye and smiled. A real smile, genuine and bright, that reached all the way to her eyes. "I love you, Mom," she said. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied. We kept working until the door was finished shining like a beacon in the twilight. We stepped back to admire our work. It wasn't perfect. There were brushstrokes and imperfections, but it was ours, and it was beautiful. The David Harper Foundation for Elder Financial Protection opened its doors on a bright spring morning. Ben ran the legal side from a small office not at Shady Oaks anymore, but in a renovated brownstone in downtown Chicago. He had 3 associates working under him now, all young lawyers eager to learn from a legend. I managed the outreach and fundraising. Turned out that 45 years of architecture had taught me a lot about building things that lasted, including organizations. We'd helped 17 seniors so far, helped them get lawyers, helped them keep their homes, helped them fight back against the children or grandchildren or caretakers who'd tried to steal from them. Each one felt like a small victory. Each one felt like David would have approved. Lisa had gone back to school to become a social worker. "I want to help people like us, Mom," she'd said. "People trapped in bad situations who just need someone to believe them." She was dating again. Slowly. Carefully. A kind man named James who taught history at the local high school and made her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in years. As for me, I was happy. Really, truly happy. I had my home. I had my daughter. I had meaningful work. And every morning before I left for the office, I walked past the shadow box in my garage. That trash bag hung there, a reminder of the darkest moment of my life and my greatest victory, because sometimes I'd learned the things people throw away contain exactly what we need to save ourselves. Sometimes trash becomes treasure, and sometimes when you're 70 years old and the world has written you off, that's when you discover just how strong you really are.